Thank you. So, unfortunately, like all migrant communities in the UK, the Sikh community has experienced its own degree of racism and discrimination, and many of this has centred around the wearing of the turban, and you talk a little bit about that in your book. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the battles the Sikh community has had, and how the community and individuals in the community have fought back against that, enabled to assert their identity and their faith?
The biggest backlash we Sikhs faced in Manchester was back in the 1960s. Obviously, in them days, discrimination was very widely in England. I personally had a lot of run-ins with the discrimination, but the biggest backlash we had was when my uncle, Singh Sagarji, applied for a employment with the Manchester Corporation Transport Department. Even though he passed the test which he was given, but he was refused employment because of his turban. He was told that the uniform cap should be worn while on duty, and if he wants to be employed, he must get rid of his turban, which was a very discriminatory factor for Gyaniji, because he was an Orthodox Sikh and believer in God, and he was academic, and he was religious advisor to all the 5 Gurdwaras in Manchester, and it was not preferable for him to get rid of his turban and be employed. Then Gyaniji took upon himself that this is a discrimination, because in the wars, First World War and the Second World War, all the Sikhs in the British Indian Army, they fought in the front lines with their turbans, took bullets in their heads with their turbans on, and then why today are we being discriminated against being employed on the buses? And this was then the campaign which my Uncle Ji carried on for the next 7 years. And with the help of the community and with the help of the local MPs, councillors, even the ex-soldiers who had served with the Sikh regiments in India, with their support and the petitions from the 3 Gurdwaras, then they were presented to the Lord Mayor of Manchester and Manchester Corporation Transport Department, MCTD, in Piccadilly Gardens headquarters, that the Sikhs must be, and beyond that, because the other cities in England, like Huddersfield, Leeds, Bradford, they all had Sikh bus conductors, drivers employed. And why Manchester was being discriminatory against the Sikhs. And this was the campaign which my uncle carried on. And after that, we won with the grace of God. And my elder brother became a bus conductor, bus driver, and he carried the flag for the Sikhs. And later on, my uncle Ji again for the helmet case, which in the Conservative government passed a rule for every motorcycle rider must wear a helmet, crash helmet. And Gyaniji then thought this was again discriminatory because people died motorbikes, and he bought a bicycle, I think which was displayed here some time ago, and he rode a bicycle, and he was jailed about 2 or 3 days in Strangeways prison, and refusing to pay the fine. And obviously, I think it was Lord Mayor Richard Harper, he even offered him to pay the fine, but Gyaniji told him not to, because this is my personal fight and I don't want any be. And I think it's about a year after when this fight, the helmet case, the Sikhs were allowed to ride the motorbicycles with their turbans on.
And you've got the reading.
And yes, I've got the reading which I will read to you now. Right. This is the dossier of my Uncle Ji, which I had the auspicion that he gave me the original copy, which I still have, and I put it into this book. I'm just going to read a bit of it for you. During the First and Second World War, Sikhs served in the British Indian Army under the British Raj. They were there with their turbans on battle and were awarded many gallantry awards. However, years later, when Sikhs living in Britain applied for jobs, they were often refused employment because of their turbans. One such example was the Manchester Corporation Transport Department, which refused to employ Sikhs as bus drivers or conductors because they had to wear a uniform hat, which was against their religious belief. Gyani Sundar Singh Sagar, an academic in Punjabi literature and a religious advisor to Manchester Sikh temples, applied for employment with the Transport Department, but was refused on the grounds that he could not wear his turban. This was a discrimination against the Sikh faith, and Gyani Ji was determined to fight for rights of the Sikhs to wear turbans while working on Manchester Council buses. After years of struggle with the authorities and gathering support, including producing a dossier and a pamphlet outlining the basics of the Sikh religion and Sikh turban, and sacrifices of the Sikh soldiers in the British Indian Army, Gyani Ji and his supporters finally succeeded in their campaign. They lobbied and rallied support from many councillors, MPs, ex-soldiers who had served in the forces with the Sikh regiments, and members of 3 Sikh temples. They also gathered a petition which was presented to the Lord Mayor of Manchester at Manchester Town Hall. In August 1960, a 12-page dossier titled The Sikh and the Turban and a 5-page deputation petition was presented at a meeting with the Manchester Corporation Transport Department, and in January they allowed the Sikhs to wear turbans and employ them on the buses. This is where my elder brother became a bus conductor and a driver.
And working for an archive, so a few days ago I asked Mr. Singh if there was a copy of this dossier, and he said, we've got it upstairs. So he has kindly brought it for us today. So on one of the tables at the back, you can look at this dossier. It's quite fragile, so please don't take your drinks anywhere near it. But if you'd like to go and have a look at the dossier, which is this amazing piece of work gathering so many different people's beliefs about why Sikhs should be able to work on the buses and wear their turbans, please take a look afterwards. We're running out of time now, aren't we? Well, last question for you, I think, is, so you've spent all these years, this incredible act of hard work and devotion. You've self-published this book. Looking forward now, what message would you like to give us, to your community, to people beyond your community, and particularly young people?
Well, the younger generation today is very educated. They have the knowledge to understand and to take on responsibilities for their culture and history. Our elders came to this country to provide a better life for their families and children. To do that, they went through very difficult times, facing many struggles to achieve what we have today. While facing many discriminatory problems and not being able to find employment because of their race, color, and their personality traits. Nevertheless, they kept their faith, religion, and their beliefs alive by not losing their identity, most of all, their native Punjabi language. Today, it has become more important to educate today's generation Punjabi language. for their social and cultural development. Native language is the language we use to communicate with family, friends, and community. It is the language that shapes our identity. It helps us to preserve and appreciate the languages and the cultures of others in order to live in one harmony. And this is my message to the younger generation which is coming, that we must learn our mother language and must speak our mother language in order to keep our authenticity alive.
Thank you. Shall we round this up? Thank you. So before we have someone special formally close the event, I just wanted to say a few words. So as I said, I work for the Ahmed Iqbal Race Centre and Education Trust, and we are a library and an archive, and our role is to document the histories of Black, Asian, ethnic minority and migrant communities in Manchester and beyond. And then we're also here to make sure those histories are shared and that everyone has access to them, and they're recognised as a really important part of Manchester's histories and the UK's histories. So for us, it was a delight to see this book being published, because we have nothing else in our library that talks specifically about Manchester's Sikh communities. So we were delighted to have the book be published, and we will be taking it into our library. We also recognise that your community stories are not adequately documented at this point in the city's archives. There are some documents here and there are some oral histories, but there is not a really good, thorough piece of work have been done so far to make sure that your community's histories are preserved somewhere central. So we have been slowly building relationships with various individuals in the community and some of the Gurdwaras, because we believe that we need to change that. We need to make sure that the histories get recorded. So I want to thank Mr. Saroop Singh Landa for writing this book, and I want to thank the various people and the Gurdwaras that have been supporting us to do this work slowly. We don't always move fast as an organisation. We've got limited amount of capacity, but I want to say to you all today that we are really committed to making sure that we don't lose these important community histories and stories. So I think on that note, it's time for me to hand over